I'm here in the Old North End of Burlington, Ward 3, with our representative, Curt McCormack. Curt, your district is 3-3, right?
Yes.
Ward 3 is the principal part of that, but it also includes parts of Ward 2.
Actually, the district is 6.4, or 6-3.
6-3, right. I should remember that, having been a former ward clerk, but it's been a couple of years. Curt bought a house here just how many years ago was it?
It'll be 2 years in November.
2 years ago. And it was at that time condemned, right?
Yes.
And so he's been renovating the house and upgrading the Old North End for us. Curt, can you tell us a little bit about your house and the background here?
Well, it was built in 1830. It was the original section, the bricks here. Back section, we don't know when, but not soon after, definitely 1800s. And it had fallen into disrepair. It was rented, but the city closed it, condemned it, and now we're fixing it up slowly.
You spend your full week in Montpelier at the House Chamber, don't you?
Yeah, all winter and all spring, yes.
So while you're there in Montpelier during the week, your partner here has been doing a lot of work on the house, hasn't she?
She has. Gail's been our best worker.
Most regular, because I'm here every day.
Yeah,
I live here.
Would you like to tell us about some of the work you've done on the house?
Well, the biggest thing is the demolition that's going on in Unit 4, because that was the main unit that was condemned. And his son Jamie and I have been up there doing things. Jamie's been bolstering up the rafters and
structural
so on.
work.
And I've been doing the demolition, taking off the plaster and the lath strips and the back plaster and the lath strips behind that, because we're going to blow in insulation throughout the whole upper unit. So we've done that, and I've done all the painting in the unit we live in. And then my proudest piece of it is the sink, which was this old sink that looked absolutely awful, and it had paint on it. It used to cut my fingers whenever I would try to scrape the little dregs of vegetables and so on and get them in, collect them, and it would break my fingers open. But now I've restored the sink, so it makes the whole kitchen feel better.
And we have one of your constituents coming to check this out. Michelle, would you like to join us here and introduce yourself?
Well, I'm just listening. Just listening.
So, Curt, you've been in the legislature for quite a while, haven't you? How many years?
Well, I was in the legislature for 14 years representing Whelan, and this is my first year representing Burlington.
So, after you moved to Burlington, you bought the house, right?
Yeah, I moved to Burlington in 2008. I didn't buy the house until 2011.
We were all in Montpelier for the May Day demonstrations just a little while ago, and you were there in the chamber while we were photographing part of the debate. They were debating at that time the end-of-life choice bill, and all of the demonstrators were out in front. In past years, for the May Day demonstration, the legislators have come out and addressed the demonstrators, but this time everybody, they worked right through the lunch hour, and so the legislators weren't able to come out and talk to the people. But would you like to say something about what was going on with the bill? And I believe that while we were there, Curt Wright was introducing an amendment.
Well, a lot of things were going on. There were a number of amendments offered, and it was a difficult bill. It's one of those bills that it's not partisan. People feel strongly on both sides. There were a lot of personal stories. Legislature is different. For me, that's one of the things that are different nowadays than the old days. There's a lot of personal stories, which is not always the best thing for debate, in my view. And that bill lent itself to that big time. So we had a lot of stories of people who had loved ones deceased and talked about that experience. Experiences were like, and they informed their decision about how to vote on it. I'm a supporter Rights Amendment was an interesting one, a challenging one to some people, but not to me. His amendment would have created a referendum statewide on just this question. And that may sound sensible. Why not have all the people vote on it? You speak with you, the legislature can be informed by that. But we're informed by people's points of view in all the other matters. And when you put a referendum out there, if you look at other states that have that in their constitution, California, Maine, Massachusetts are three that come to mind, they get down to a short race with one question that's all in the media. So it's whoever raises the most amount of money is usually the decider for things. And I really dislike that. It's one of the reasons I voted against the campaign finance bill the other day. I don't like when spending gets so high, because the winner can be the person who raises the most amount of money. And I think, ironically, I think the Supreme Court made a mistake. I think that if you and I are running against each other for office, the same office, and you're able to raise, say, twice as much money as I am, it's my freedom of speech that gets curtailed by that, not yours if we limit it. In other words, if you're allowed to raise, let's just say for the sake of discussion, $10,000 for a house raise, which is about what I raised, and I raised the least of the four of us in all rooms. If we limit that to 10,000, the court says you can't do that because your freedom of speech is being curtailed. But if you raise more than I do, then it's my freedom of speech that's curtailed, because I can't advertise as much as you and do all those things that money buys in an election. So I'd rather have our elections just be as inexpensive as possible. And it's the same thing with Kurt Heights. We have the same first name, Kurt, right?
Yes.
So,
I think he spells it with a K, though.
he does, and I'm a C.
Yes.
But we have very different politics, so that's why I do like to make the distinction, which I'm sure you guys as well. So his amendment may sound sensible, but to me it wasn't. And we certainly know how people feel. I think on that particular bill I probably received at least 20 emails and telephone calls.
I agree with you about campaign finance. The principle of democracy is one person, one vote. But now in America, it's become $1, one vote. And I think that's very wrong. But Curt Wright's amendment, there were so many amendments there, and I think there was something like 30 amendments. And the chamber debated on Tuesday until 11:30 at night, and then again on the people that were against the bill seemed to just try to wear it down. And none of the amendments passed. There was an overwhelming majority in favor of the bill. I believe at one point it was 90 to 60 in favor, and or against the amendments. But Curt's proposal to put it on the ballot, that would have thrown out. I sat in the Senate chamber for 2 whole days listening to the debate, and there were testimonies. Public had an opportunity to testify before the 2 committees, first for the Senate and then again for the House. And that was another 2 days of work. And then there were 2 days of work in the House debate with the amendments. And all that would have been wasted if Curt's amendment had passed. So even though Curt didn't specifically say he was opposed to the bill, it was a very negative thing which he did. And I was disappointed in him. But how has it been going in the House generally? I understand that on Wednesday night we finally passed the bill. What are the prospects now for it?
I actually don't know its status. I know it was debated in the Senate. A bill goes back and forth. If there's changes, if the second body, if the House takes a Senate bill that's passed the Senate and makes no changes and then passes it, it goes directly to the governor. It's finished, but we seldom do that. The House usually has a change to a Senate bill and vice versa. So this bill was very much changed in the House, and I think very much improved. I think we really did respond to the critics of it and put in a lot of safeguards, as you know. It's quite a process, a lot of checks before somebody can have physician-assisted suicide. those questions have to be looked at by the Senate, and they were being looked at. And I actually don't know exactly where we are on it, but I believe I believe they reached a compromise in the Senate and agree with it, and it may have actually passed already. By the time this airs, it will be passed. I think as of now, I think it might actually be passed. I think it's going well. It's going to pass.
So the legislative session ends on Monday, doesn't it?
Well, maybe it was supposed to end yesterday, and it didn't. So when I say supposed, it's very difficult to end the session, and this is something that, frankly, I think the media makes a bigger deal about than it is. There's a lot of bills to attend the last day of any session, and if those bills are important to somebody, and some of them are always important to me and my constituents, I'm willing to stay as long as it takes to pass them, or to kill them, whatever the case may be. A lot of work. The end of the session is actually extremely productive, much more productive than earlier on.
That end-of-life choice bill, though, is probably the most important bill of the whole session. It would be really tragedy if that were put off until next year. As I hope that it will get to the governor's desk and be signed before the end.
Yes, well, my brother is in the Senate, and he's very active on this bill, as you know. And I had dinner with him, I think that was Wednesday night, and I think they had gotten it through what we call second reading. So I think it's actually passed. And as we speak, I think it's probably at the governor's desk.
Well, that's really good news. I did an interview with Peter Shumlin before he was first elected governor, and he at that time supported the bill, so I'm confident that he will sign it. After we left the House chamber, we went outside to the demonstrators again, and there was a lot going on out there. They had a puppet show which really tied the whole thing together, and we're going to show that as part of this program. But then about 3 o'clock, the people started coming home, and there was another demonstration on Main Street in front of the State House, and that was a group of people that wants to close down Vermont Yankee. How do you feel about that, Curt?
Well, I've always thought Vermont Yankee should be closed. The longer it stays open, the more dangerous it is, and the more waste it generates. And we've made some tremendous gains in renewable energy and conservation and efficiency that we need nuclear power less and less nationwide. I'm speaking when I say that. But yeah, of course it should be shut down. And Vermonters don't even get any power from it. We get no power from it.
Where does the power go?
To other states. We've never gotten, I think, more than a third of its power. In other words, of 100% of Vermont Yankee's power, only about a third of it came to Vermont. Now it's zero. The legislature made that move before I got back there, which was great. There's a lot. The legislature's done a lot, and of course, Governor Shumlin is very much opposed to Vermont Yankee. And there was a time when there were just a handful of us. So that's great to see. It's one of the nice things about being back is that there's been progress for sure. And I remember I'm the sponsor of Act 78, which is the state's solid waste law. We passed that in 1987. And back in those days, I was the only one talking about things like recycling. Now it's very much a part of our culture and legislatively as well. So it's really great to be back there and see the progress that's been made in those areas and the increased number of people working, such as climate change. Great work on climate change.
And you've actually put your money where your politics are by building solar collectors here on your house, right?
Yes, we didn't build them. They're used, and that was good. And my son and I put them up just yesterday.
Shall we turn the camera so that we can see the collectors? Okay, we've turned the camera a little bit so that we can see the solar collectors. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about the solar collectors? I think there are 3 of them, Curt.
Yes, they're for making hot water, and they fit beautifully up there on top of the garage, and we put them up just yesterday, and the plumbers will plumb them through the ground. They've already put pipes in the ground, and they'll come out to the basement and connect to the water heater and make 100% of our hot water in the spring, summer, and fall, and about 50% of the hot water in the winter.
How about your electricity?
Well, the electricity, these are just for hot water. So electricity, thanks to natural gas, we have very small electric bills here because we don't heat. When we're not heating hot water with the collectors, we'll be using gas. And we keep the house with gas, and we cook with gas, and we use clotheslines to dry clothes. My electric bill for my unit is usually $17 or $18 a month. So it would never make sense to put in a solar system for electricity. Not in this house.
You have 2 rental units in the house too, right?
Actually, yeah, we have 3. It's a 4-unit house, and Gail and I live in 1 unit, and the other units are rented. Only one of them is rented now. Thanks to the campaign that you and I were in last fall, I'm way behind. So we have 1 rented, this one here, which we're very happy with, and then we're working on these 2. And we're doing a number of things, what you might call environmental things to the property. One of the things that the zoning board particularly likes is that instead of replacing all the windows and fighting with them about using vinyl or not, we took the old windows out. And these are the original windows. They're very old. The glass is kind of a little wavy, and we took them out and refurbished them. We cleaned them up, painted them, and installed this high-quality weather stripping on all 4 sides, and they work beautifully. And they're now operating in that unit. We're very happy with those, and we're doing things like that as much as we can. We go down to Rebuild on Pine Street and purchase as much as we can from them. We've gotten light fixtures from them, kitchen counters, and the paint. Yes, thanks. One of the best things they sell are the recycled paint. The Solid Waste District, Chittenden Solid Waste District makes out of unused waste paint. And you know, when you have a little bit of paint left, and sometimes you have more than a little, and it just sits in your cellar for years, you can bring it to the Solid Waste District for free, and the stuff that's good enough, they will recycle. The water-based paint, and it's much cheaper. They charge about half as much as the price of primer, and it's high-quality paint. We're using only that paint on the whole house, inside and out. It'll be a while before we get to the outside, but what else from Rebuild? Just plumbing fixtures, anything we can.
The cabinets, doorknobs.
Yep. Yeah, right down to doorknobs, and then we're having it completely insulated. We have about R40 up in the attic here, which is new construction. We're using spray foam insulation wherever possible. We were very lucky to find out that the bricks are actually not solid all the way through to the inside like bricks usually are. The bricks are actually a veneer, which means we had a cavity, the usual cavity that a house that's not bricks would have. And because this house is so old, it was built in 1830, there's no insulation in there. So they were able to blow insulation in there, which was great, and it's extremely energy efficient now. The gas bill just plummeted. It's also oriented well. South faces right down North Union Street here, because what's a little confusing when you're up in as you know, in the old North End, most of our streets are not on the street grid. They're just all over the place, crisscrossing each other and going in funny angles. But this is sort of the northern remnants of the grid, which is North Union Street. So even though from here it looks like an angle, it's not in terms of the grid. Dead south is down that street. North Union Avenue is not dead south. But the house, the corner of the house points dead south, which means the sun rises and we get nice sun in the eastern windows in the morning, and then it just goes around on the west side in the afternoon. And anytime the sun's out, it's shining through some windows, at least in the front units, which makes a tremendous difference. Today you would think that the heat was on when you walk in there, and it wasn't. We're filming on May the 11th. Okay to say that? May the 12th, actually. And it's quite cool this morning. And yet but the apartment's very comfortable.
I was glad I wore my
Yeah, there you go.
today.
There's the proof.
The heat hasn't been on for days,
Yeah, oh, more than days, I think.
weeks.
Yeah, weeks.
But your tenants, they probably will have their own electricity hookup, right?
They have their own electricity hookup now.
Will they use your?
Yes, I supply all the hot water. It was easier that way because I really wanted to have the solar system, and you can't have a solar system for each unit. I mean, you could, but it'd be very expensive to do that. So that'll heat the hot water for everybody, and then so it's my expense.
What are you going to do about the heating? Does that include the heat for them?
No, well, at the moment it does, but when we're all finished, every unit will pay its own heat as well.
They'll pay their own heat and their own electric.
Correct.
Yes, that's the most prudent way, I think.
It is. I mean, you know, I like to put it this way. I'm a conservationist. I save energy wherever I can. But when I'm in a hotel, I probably don't turn the lights off quite as diligently as I do when I'm home. And the reason is I'm not paying that bill. And when I conserve in the hotel, it doesn't lower my hotel bill, does it?
No.
So you're not quite as good. And I think we're all that way. So
Yeah, I think I'm that way too.
yeah. So everyone should pay their own utility bills. I think there's no better way to bring about conservation.
And Gail, would you like to tell us a little bit about the garden here and where these old bricks came from?
Well, a couple of days last week, a couple of days ago, or last week, there was a chimney that Jamie pulled down using his truck, and the smokestacks, or the pipes from the stove, were going through that chimney originally, but we pulled it down, and I noticed that they had a beautiful round pattern in the top, and that round pattern could be, in my mind, a pot for growing tomatoes, but they were filled with creosote, and I discovered you can't scrub it off, so I got liners from the Intervale gardening site, and they're plastic, and I put my tomato plants in the compost soil and mixed soil from the Intervale gardening supply place. So, and one of our renters has these, I call them woolly pockets, and he's got his tomatoes in there, so they're just going to be there in those little pots. It doesn't look all that fancy with raised beds, but it was totally inexpensive, and recycling the old chimney, so that's our garden.
And it's the equivalent of a raised bed garden right here, right?
Yeah. And it was instantaneous. The thing came down, and I said, oh, that's going to be my garden. And we didn't have to build the raised bed, and I didn't have to wait for Curt to come home and help with that. We just did it. We rolled them over here, and the next day we put the tomatoes in.
Who is Jamie?
Oh, that's Curt's son. He's a general contractor, and he's doing a lot of the work, most of the work.
And the garden here also includes a very pretty, is that a lilac bush?
Yeah, and because it's Mother's Day today, lilacs always seem to bloom on Mother's Day, and that's very aromatic. It's wonderful. They're all over town, and every time we pass one, a bush, we're sniffing them. We did that last night on our way home. We stopped at every bush and smelled them.
They match your shirt too.
Yeah, they do.
Totally serendipitous.
Well, shall we walk around a little more and see other parts of the house?
Oh, yeah.
We're here in front of the compost. Can you tell us how this works, Curt?
Well, it's a simple compost, not a bucket, but vessel. It's what we call cold composting because it doesn't get that hot. Although this one should work very well because it'll have 4 units using it, and the tenants use it, of course. Because you know we're in the city, this nice container, it works very well. We're allowed to put all your things in. You throw in food waste as well. You add a little water to it. It works very well.
Where does the water go?
You just dump it on top of it, yeah. And
what's this on the bottom here?
That's where the compost will come out. Which we haven't even opened yet. You can see right now what it's looking like.
Oh.
Yeah, no, it's not ready yet. You see?
Yeah.
You see it's moist.
But I can see it's developing.
Yep.
Well, let's go inside and see some of the inside of the house. Keep it, don't turn it off.
We'll be, when we're finished with the porch, we'll put a gutter system in here, and it'll come right down the middle, and we'll retrieve that water and use that for the compost, for watering plants, for anything we can that's not potable. And that will conserve water. A lot of things like that you can do. Clotheslines. This clothesline here is actually not mine, it's the tenants. When they asked me, I said, of course you have a clothesline. That's what we'd like you to use, because we don't supply laundry. So we'll have clotheslines and water retrieval, rainwater retrieval, composting. Of course, we have good recycling thanks to the city and the solid waste district. And people can park wherever they want. But want to throw the compost in now?
Over here we have
compost.
a Folgers coffee bin. Can you tell us what that is for, Gail?
Well, a lot of people in Vermont know how to compost and collect it and so on. But for those people who haven't started doing it or are wondering how to do it, and it's really easy, just we collect it in a Folgers can on the kitchen counter, and it's always kept shut. And we throw all the organic material in there, and as soon as it fills up, walk out here and put it in. So I taught my friend in Boston to do this. She had no idea how to compost. And I said, you can't believe how easy it is. You start with an old coffee container, and you know, we've got our banana peels and everything in there. And you'd think it was revolutionary for her because it did require a small lifestyle change, but now she's investing in a larger composter in the yard like we have. So.
That's an important contribution to the state too, because I just read in the paper not too long ago that one of the garbage disposal areas was being closed, and we don't have that much area to dispose of our garbage, do we here, Curt?
No, we don't. That's the Moortown landfill that the state did not recertify, which I think is a good thing. I think the agency made the right decision. And the legislature just last year passed a good bill that would require composting in every town and eventually mandate it. So someday we'll have composting. If you don't want to have a thing in your own yard, you won't have to have it. It can be picked up at the curb just like your garbage and your recyclables. I think composting is very important because, you know, the landfills, the pollution that comes from landfills is mainly organic. It's not hazardous waste and man-made chemicals as much as it is natural organics. The reason it's a pollutant in the landfill is that the landfill is what's unnatural. Nature does not provide for mountains of organics. Beneath our feet is fertile soil, but only for a couple of feet. And then below that, it's not fertile. There aren't organics down there. It's inert. It's just sand and stone, and that's how nature operates. It operates on the surface, and a mountain of garbage, of organics. Some of it inside plastic bags, some of it some of it not getting any water, some of it none of it getting any air. Once it gets pretty deep, you get anaerobic digestion, which is not the same as composting, and things don't degrade the way they're meant to, and the way they do in nature. So that's where the pollution actually from landfills is mainly the organic pollution, and that's what pollutes the water. It's a long involved biological discussion, but it's the biological demand. The organics they need oxygen. So when that material is leached, the rain falls in the landfill and the water leaches out and makes it to the river or the lake, whatever the landfill is close to, that material, that organic material, needs oxygen, and so it eats the oxygen in the water, and that's what kills the fish. And that's called the biological oxygen demand. That becomes too high. And so composting is just great, and I think it's great the legislature passed that, and that was led by the Chittenden County Solid Waste District. And that container, you can buy it from the district, and it's only about, I think, $40–45. And that's cheap from the district. It's a nice one, but you don't even have to have a vessel if you don't want to. You just make a pile. But I think in town it's a good idea, so you don't attract any rodents. I saw a skunk walking around the back one night, and that was it. I've never seen any other rodents, never seen any evidence of them.
That's very interesting. You've been a long time environmentalist, and I believe a personal note here that you and Gail met through an environmental group, didn't you?
You can say that. Actually, we met. We met on electronic dating, and the site that we both found each other on is called Green Singles.
.com.
.com. So it's I don't know that much about them, but that's what it is. It's a dating service for people who consider themselves green or are looking for another green person.
But I want to add one thing about that. I was spending the summer down in Boston, and my friend told me about this out in South Dakota. And when I went on, one of the first people that I saw was Curt. But what was most interesting to me about him was that several of his pictures showed him with Africans, South Africans, and I think in Haiti and so on. I'd been to Haiti. I'd always wanted to go to Africa, but he had worked in Africa with the Peace Corps, and he went when he was 52, and he went to set up solid waste systems for 4 cities in Senegal, including composting and recycling. And so I thought this man not only was green, but he was international, and a lot of my background includes international work too. So we just started talking, and then we met on my way up to visit my cousins in the Adirondacks. I met him, and he invited me to lunch, and we ate right here.
That's very interesting. Shall we go inside and look at the inside of the house?
Absolutely.
We're going into, is it
Unit
turning?
4.
Okay, we're going into Unit 4 now in the, on the side of the house. Adjust automatically to the light.
Oh, that's great.
I see that there's an enormous amount of work to be done here.
Yes, this unit's being gutted, as we say, and we weren't going to, but when we started to, I guess when my son took some of these walls off in here in the kitchen, he discovered that it had back plastering. Back plastering is when you have plaster. Here's the lath and here's the plaster, and then behind it is another little wall of lath and plaster. And they did that, I believe, for fireproofing, to get more plaster in there. But by doing that, they were making the space difficult to blow insulation into. So we decided to take it all off, and this is one of the main things Gail's doing, is tearing it all off. And it's expensive to dispose of. It's construction waste. It's not hazardous, but it's heavy. And it gives us the opportunity to completely rewire it. And then the insulation will be the foam, blown foam, which is the best insulation in terms of amount of Rs, the amount of heating value or insulation value you get per inch. Foam is the best.
Why do we have these 2x4s? Are these supporting the ceiling?
They are. The roof, the main reason that this house was condemned was that the roof was leaking. And at some point, probably about 150 years ago, somebody put a slate roof on it. And it wasn't a good idea because it wasn't steep enough for slate, and it had too many nooks and crannies, as you can see from in here. You've got these little dormers and all these little corners, and it looked like they'd always had trouble. We had a lot of rotten wood up there. So we decided to take the slate off and put in more modern roofing, and we needed a zoning permit for that. In the front of the house, we were able to save the slate, and my son's a good roofer, and he spent a lot of time taking out broken slate and fitting in new ones. None of them are new, of course. They were used as well, but you know, slate lasts forever if it doesn't break. As they say, it's good for about 500 years. It's the fasteners that eventually go. So we saved the slate in the front, and here we're getting a brand new roof. And this has been one of those projects where the more we dug into it and tried to do something, the more we had to rebuild. So he has rebuilt this whole thing, and we decided to not have a ceiling. The ceiling used to be just above my head up here. And now we're going to have a vaulted ceiling. You're going to like a cathedral ceiling. You'll be able to see it, and that's another reason we're using the foam. And then there'll be plywood on the top that has foam on it as well. This will be extremely well insulated, like a super tight modern, what they call high performing building. Very well insulated.
These 2x4s, these are temporary, right?
Yes, they're temporary.
Yes.
Yep.
See the jack here? Get the jack. There's going to be, as I understand it, there's going to be some cables here. And Jamie brought in an engineer the other day and advised him on how to do that. And there'll be a cable here, and these beams, these 2x4s will be gone, and the weight will be spread out using some cables.
This is an interesting construction feature over here. You notice these 2x4s here go from one roof support over to the other, and they appear to hold the two sides of the roof together. Do you know what construction purpose they serve?
Yes, they're very important. It's called a collar tie, and it ties together. These are called rafters. A lot of times people misuse the word rafter, but this is what a rafter is. It goes up like that. And this is a collar tie binding these two and making a triangle, which gives a tremendous strength compared to if it wasn't there. And one of the things they're trying to accomplish, which is going to be very interesting, that Gail was just talking about, was they're going to come down with a post only about to this point and then go back at the rafters with a cable. And it's to try to accomplish the same thing a collar tie does without having collar ties. So I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it sounded like a very interesting thing. And it's going to be exposed when we're all finished, which I kind of like that. Like restaurants these days compared to the old days, they don't hide the air conditioning system, the duct system, and the piping, and the sprinkler system. You look up and you see them, and you don't deny that they're there. You know, like the Pompidou Center in Paris.
Yes, I just thought of that.
Did you? Yeah,
I studied there at the Pompidou Center during the summer of 1983.
Great. I've only walked around and looked at it. I love the idea, and so we'll have a little bit of that here.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it is. This unit's going to be so nice. It's got some interesting features like this. The old counter there and those cabinets. My son and I had this ongoing disagreement. He would take out more things than I would. I like to save as much as possible. And so I've insisted that we save those cabinets. As you can see, Jan has taken out the plaster all the way to them. But I told her, don't go any farther because we want to save those cabinets, because I just love the way they go down on an angle like that. And they're still actually not in such bad condition.
You can see the plaster all over the floor, and this just came down last week. There's a bucket over there. This bucket Jamie uses when he's doing painting to bring paint up onto the roof where he is. But I discovered this is the best way for me to get the plaster out of here. I use the dustpan and broom, put the plaster in there, and every bucket I take down to the front porch. Because putting it in those big garbage cans, we can't carry it anywhere. So I just do it little by little, and it's small scale, but it gets it down to the front porch. Then we slide it onto the back of his truck and take it right over to the dump.
It must be expensive to take a truckload of plaster to the dump.
We had about 1,000 pounds. What was the cost? $70?
Yeah, that's about right. Yeah, I think it was about $70 for 1,000 pounds.
But by the time you finish up here, how many thousand pounds are you going to have?
Well, this is the end of it here, so only one other trip, I think.
Two trips will do it.
Yeah, I haven't added up, but that's another reason to try to save as much as possible is disposal costs, and which I think is a good thing. You know, it shouldn't be free. So it's another incentive to try to preserve things. There's a cost at the dump, and it takes time, and it's tough on the truck. The plaster is extremely heavy. Jamie points out that another reason for gutting the unit is actually going to be good for the roof, because the whole apartment was heavy. And so the whole house will actually benefit. When we're finished, the new sheetrock and the new insulation are much lighter than all this plaster was.
Not so much stress on the foundations, I guess.
Yeah, well, the whole house, the structure is what more he was thinking, just actually pulling on all the way to the roof. And this is just going to be so much stronger. You know, in the old days, they didn't have standards yet. I mean, farmers built their own houses and they did all their own work, and a lot of, at least structurally, a lot of new buildings are actually better built. And that's why I really like what we're doing here, which is we're taking a very old house and renovating it and saving as much as we can, but improving it structurally. I mean, just look at these 2x8s out here. Just yesterday I was complaining to Jamie that, God, they're so big. And he said, oh, I wish I had bigger ones. I guess those look like 2x10s or 12s. But that's not how they did it in the old days.
Burlington requires a certificate of occupancy. Curt, Burlington, I think, requires a certificate of occupancy before you can start renting. How do you work that into the construction? Do you have to have periodic inspections, or how do you consider that?
You have to have, I actually don't know how often a unit is inspected once you have first passed an inspection. But you cannot rent without the certificate, and you must obtain that before you rent. So I've been through that with the one unit that we are renting, and I think it went very well. I think it's a good group of people that work at code enforcement, and I think they really do work with you, work with owners, and trying to get things done, and it certainly makes the housing a lot safer. I actually wish we had more on energy efficiency in there. That you had to. I don't think it's right in 2013 to be renting an apartment to somebody that has to pay the heat bill themselves. And we talked about that before. That I think that's a good thing, but on the other hand, the landlord should make sure the place is relatively energy efficient as well. And I'd like to see that added to the code enforcement. That the place has to be insulated and meet a certain standard. I really don't think it's very nice to be renting an apartment, telling the tenant you have to pay the heat bill, and it's not insulated. And the windows are single pane and all that. So code enforcement, I think they work very well with owners. And I say it in that way because Burlington does have a lot of regulation in housing, and so between the zoning and the construction and the code enforcement, it's actually 3 different offices that you must work with, so it's a lot of work. Just making sure you've done everything to meet those codes. But it does work well, and I guess I should say that, you know, I don't have any complaints.
I think we have a hot code issue right here. What is this piece here that in the wall?
Oh, well, no, it's actually not a code issue. It'll be an energy issue. As you may know, I'm a master electrician also, so on that work, I have the permit for doing that work. And one of the advantages of gutting this unit is that this is an exterior wall, and here's the what we call the sub panel, the circuit panel that's for this unit, and it's quite large, and it takes up the entire space. The back of it, my fingers just barely fit behind it. There's no room for even spray insulation back there. So this is a big hole in the insulation, and it breaks the vapor barrier, and it breaks the integrity of the whole insulation. And this place is going to be so well insulated. It's like new construction, and we would never do this in new construction. We wouldn't put it in the exterior wall for that reason. So since we're gutting it, I'm going to take it right out of there, and haven't decided where it's going to go yet, but probably over there, in an interior wall. And I'll be rewiring this whole unit. So when you do gut a place like this, there's a lot of advantages. Because when you're finished, you have nice new wiring, like a new place. If there's any plumbing required, and there is, as you can see, that's newly done and done well. And then of course the insulation, you're insulated well. So, and you can do things like that. So no, it's actually not a violation where it's looking, not a code, not an electrical code violation.
But it would be an issue if you weren't a qualified electrician, I think, right? Because the code would say that in order to get fire insurance, you would have to have.
Oh yeah.
Passed.
No, well, in a house that you're renting, which is commercial, all your plumbing has to be done by a licensed plumber. All your electrical has to be done by a licensed electrician. And even the gas, my plumber could not work on the gas because he's not gas licensed. He's only a master plumber. And I guess we have a master, I'm not sure what the license is called, but we have a license just for gas. And so I have a different contractor that comes and works on the gas.
Those are Burlington City ordinances that control that, aren't they?
They are. There's state law about that, but the ones I just described are city ordinance, yes.
I owned a house similar to this, 3 units in the suburbs of New York City, and I have a degree in electrical engineering, and so I was fully qualified to do all of the electrical wiring upgrades, and but I discovered that in order to maintain my certificate of occupancy and my fire insurance, I had to have either an electrician do it or inspect it before I closed up the wall to be qualified. But in parts of for a while I lived in Waterbury Center, and when I first moved to Vermont, and there in the ski lodge, the work was done by amateurs, people who had no license or engineering degree or anything, and it appeared to be okay. But fortunately in Burlington we have higher standards, don't you think?
We definitely do. But even when you say a ski lodge in Waterbury or so, that's a ski lodge. It would be commercial, and electrical and plumbing should have been done by a licensed person.
Well, that's what I told them, but they didn't seem to think so. Well, that was a long time ago.
You know, it's regulation of this type is it's difficult. It's never easy. It's always somewhat cumbersome. But I've been an electrician long enough that I can tell you, I've seen the standard of work rise through the regulation. So, you know, we might complain that why do I need an inspection? Just all I did was put in one smoke detector someplace. I need a permit for that. And so we can all find examples of where it's overly cumbersome or unnecessarily cumbersome. But in the end, there's no question about it. The electrical work that we used to see back in the early 1970s, there was a lot of terrible work that was allowed to take place, and that caused fires, at least in electrical. And I'm sure plumbers have their stories too, because in this house, the plumbing was just awful. I thought we were going to be able to save the plumbing, and my plumber said, "No, we just can't. It won't pass inspection." And you can see why. It was just awful. And the roofing was so bad, and the electrical, just my luck, the whole place had been rewired. The only reason I'm wiring this unit is because we're tearing it apart. So it had what we call wire molding, which is, yeah, we took it all out, didn't we? Wire molding is the word molding, just like wood molding. It's kind of nice looking, but it runs on the surface. And it's for old work. But and it's perfectly safe, and I don't mind the way it looks, but some people do, because it's on the surface. It's a type of conduit system, really. So now that it's going to be so open, and since I am the electrician, I will completely rewire it. So it'll be nice. The boxes will be in the walls like people expect to see. And like I said, that circuit panel will be over there in an interior wall where it won't be a ways for us to lose heat.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Shall we go to another room?
Well, we could look at the bathtub that we're saving.
This is one of those really old bathtubs. I remember we used to have this in my house in New York. In fact, we still had one when I sold it.
I'm sorry.
I grew up taking baths in tubs like this as a girl.
But you were talking about the plumbing. The old plumbing was probably lead pipes, wasn't it?
No, our plumbing was. Unfortunately, the plumbing in the house was fairly modern, but it wasn't done professionally, and that really makes a difference. It was just awful. Leaks everywhere, pipes not supported, pipes in places that were vulnerable to freezing. The way the plumber has designed this system, it's great. Everything is interior, even if the house should be abandoned for some reason in the winter months, the pipes will not break. And I wanted to also mention, I don't know if you noticed, Terry, when we walked in here, how warm this room is. But as Gail points out, the furnace hasn't run.
In weeks.
It's really been, I don't think we haven't run at all in May. Mm-hmm. So it's been at least several weeks. Last time it ran was sometime in April. And yet this room feels like it was heated. And the reason for that is that the occupied units where we live and the one that's rented have such nice passive solar through the windows. And that's the only source of heat in here. Since April, and they're right here. This is beyond these walls, or is the other unit that's rented, and then we live right below it. So with that door shut, this room heats up, and so it's just amazing. And of course, the ceiling above us is the attic, and that's all insulated. Insulation will be blown into those walls, or already has already been up here. That's what those holes are for, and that hole up there, they patch that. They drill a hole, about a 2.5-inch hole, and then with the blower they blow the insulation in there. This is not new technology, but it's really perfected. I'm very impressed because I had that done on my house in Rutland, about 1980, and they do a much better job today. They've really got it down, the professionals that do that. So yeah, getting back to the regulation, I do believe in professionalism. I think when the trades are professionalized, there's just no comparison. It's worth the money. You have to pay these guys. So.
The studs go every 16 inches, right?
No.
No?
No, this is an old house. They're, I think they're erratic. I think they're roughly every 2 feet.
Oh. Yeah. But still, they did miss an insulation here because, you see, there's more than 2 feet going over there.
Yeah, no, they got it some other way then. You know what? This is above the, yeah, we're in the brick section now. This was done, I can show you, well, it's covered now in sheetrock, but our kitchen is right below us, and that's how they got in there.
Well, they blew it upwards.
They blew it up, yeah.
Okay.
No, they run a snake, they make sure they know how big the bay is that they found, and then they pump the insulation into it. And they do things like, I actually can't show you now, but we have radiators in the front units, and where the radiators run next to a window, they'll literally drill holes right here to get that insulation behind that wall, because the radiator blocks them from drilling, say, here. So they drill holes up here.
In the windowsill.
Yep. And pump them down in, they put these little plugs in. They make sure they get the insulation everywhere they can. And then when they're finished, the auditor, we had, this is a good thing to talk about also for you viewers, Vermont Gas offers an incentive, a substantial incentive, for certain energy efficiency projects. I say certain because they'll come, this is Vermont Gas now, if you're a Vermont Gas customer, they will come to your house and for free give you an energy audit. And then they take that audit and they sit down with it and they look at your gas bill and your gas heating bill, and they figure out the payback of certain investments in efficiency. If they think it's a good enough investment, if the payback is fast enough, if it's worth doing, then they will pay a portion of it. In a single family house, they'll pay 30%, which really, that's substantial. And
did you get them to pay part of your?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I'm getting more than that because, as you know, there's a difficulty in getting landlords to insulate buildings that they rent because the tenant pays the heat bill. And that we've had that dilemma for years, trying to get apartment houses insulated. And this is something the legislature worked on this year. We passed a bill, but it wasn't anywhere near as strong as we wanted it to be. That's another story, but we're working on it in the legislature, and Vermont Gas has an excellent program to bring it about. So I'm actually getting a 45% incentive, which is very substantial. And it helps you pay for things at the same time. It was this time to do this to this building is now. But if it weren't for them, I wouldn't be able to do all these things. It's too expensive. So that incentive really helps, and it helps make things happen. So if a landlord does it, and the tenant's going to be paying the heat, and that's what I'm an example of, they'll pay even more.
45%.
Yep, yep. Well, it depends. It's a formula. I think it can actually go all the way to 50%. I'm getting a little less because I live in one unit.
Huh.
So that's not for me. It's for the other units. So you get the idea. They're trying to incentivize a landlord who's creating a unit, which we want landlords to do in Burlington, and we want them to insulate it. And they don't always do that because they're not the ones that benefit from it. Because the beneficiary of insulation is the person paying the gas bill, or the heat bill, whatever it is. When the landlord's not the same, when the landlord doesn't pay the heat,
there's no motivation.
There's no motivation. So Vermont Gas gives, I think, a substantial motivation. And I think it should be required. But
I think that's a great idea. It benefits everybody.
It does. It's a great program. And but even if you don't rent, if you live in a single family house and you own it, they will pay 30%.
Mm-hmm.
So the audit's free, and they might not like us advertising this because they're going to rush of people, but it's a great program. And so the reason I brought them up was that you asked about how do we make sure they've gotten all the nooks and crannies. The auditor comes back and he inspects, and he has this great little device called an infrared camera. And if the temperature differential between indoors and outdoors is great enough, I think it's about 15 degrees, it literally shows, you can see what's in the walls. That's how we discovered that our brick section had the cavity. Normally, the bricks would go all the way through and you wouldn't have any place to insulate. You'd have to just have uninsulated walls. But his infrared camera showed the studs. And then because we could see the studs and we had the darkness, which in the camera means no insulation or little insulation, and then the studs come out a light color because they provide some insulation, you can actually, what it does is show you a picture of your walls as if you had X-ray vision. Mm-hmm. That's what infrared is all about, and it's great. So that's how we discovered that we had studs and cavities, and that's why that was insulated. He came back and did it again to make sure the insulation was complete. It's pretty neat.
A stud-framed house would normally be have wood clapboards on the outside. So I would think maybe the brick was put on to replace clapboards later. A brick house would have no studs, right?
That's right, or there might be a type of construction where there's studs and bricks. I don't know. I have to talk to a historical person that knows the history of our buildings. I've had buildings. I had a 4-family house in Montpelier that had that looked like a clapboard house. It was a clapboard house, and it had studs, but they had dumped broken up pieces of brick into each cavity all the way up. So we could not insulate that. You couldn't wire it. You couldn't do much except gut it, which we did not do. So there's that style, and I've seen that in an old farmhouse of my grandfather's in Bethel. Same thing. So there were a lot of different ways to skin a cat in the old days. They didn't have standards. People just built, and maybe they had sort of standards where people, the word was around about pouring bricks into your bays. It might have been one thing, but nowadays there are standards, and because they weren't, you get all sorts of different things, all different types of construction. So I'm sure there's people, what we might call architectural historians that, or just our historians that could answer your questions a lot better than I could.
I was impressed in my first visit to Europe. The construction technique over there was so different. In Switzerland, we saw houses being built, and they don't use the frame construction at all. It's solid wood. It's almost like a log cabin construction, only the square beams. And they stack them on top of one another, so there's no cavity at all in the walls. But I'll bet they have a problem with insulation and not being able to get into a cavity. The stuff that they spray in here, it used to be asbestos. What is it now, fiberglass?
There's no more asbestos, that's for sure. And they've really improved the foam also. There's no more formaldehyde in the foam. That's a great question. And this house is going to have a combination of almost everything. Where we have the cavities where the brick is, you don't want cellulose there. Cellulose is recycled newsprint. Great material, treated to be fire retardant, and made to be just kind of, it's loose. So you either lay it, you just pour it into attics, or it can be blown into cavities that are enclosed. You don't use it where the brick is, because with the brick, moisture gets through. And if the cellulose gets wet, it gets dense and it starts to settle, and then you'll have a gap in the top. And also when it's wet, it won't work as well. I can't explain this, but I know the basic idea of insulation is to create space. And so that's why wood insulates probably better than air, but not much better, because it's pretty dense. Metal is terrible because it conducts heat right through it. So all insulation does is try to make space, and that's why foam works so well and is so light. So up there we have a blown fiberglass, loose fiberglass. Now that may sound, when I first heard it, I said, oh, I don't want fiberglass, I don't want to breathe it, I don't want to be around it, I hate it because I've done electrical work for years and I hate to be around fiberglass insulation. But they've improved that too. It's much nicer. Even if you pick a piece up and squeeze it, it actually feels like cotton. And the old stuff did not. The old stuff, it almost cut your fingers when you did this. It was mean. You could feel the glass fibers. I don't know what they've done to it, but it's much nicer. So that's what's in there. Then below us in Unit 3, and what we were going to do up here, but we decided not to, is good old cellulose. Recycled newsprint, made into this almost powder. And that's what's also in the ceiling above us in this attic. There's also some old-fashioned fiberglass batting, big 9-inch pieces, that I put up there before they came and put all the cellulose up, because somebody in the past had insulated the cellar ceiling against the first floor. You shouldn't do that. What you want to do is insulate the cellar walls against the outside, and have that all be part of the house. And so it's okay if heat transfers between, sorry, my throat is dry, between the cellar and the first floor, if you follow me. We might want to go to the cellar, because you can see the foam there.
Yeah, we can do that.
That's pretty neat.
I think
There's
the
a chimney right here. So you have bricks here. I guess you'll have to not use the cellulose there, right?
Well, we don't need this. This is not a place that they'll have any insulation because it's not the outdoors. That's the chimney. We just have this one single chimney left for the gas furnace, and so that won't be insulated at all. The reason this is the way it is the plumber had to have for the plumber we had to take this all apart so they could run that pipe in there. When we're finished, the sink will be there, toilet over there, and this will be like a closet.
I think this dust is getting to you a bit. This place is highly dusty, and we're walking around and stirring it up.
No, I think it's just talking too much. Let me get a swallow of water.
Okay.
Here's where that old chimney was. It's now the garden, and that's what Jamie uses to work on the roof and the side of the house.
I gave myself a hernia cranking that thing with him one day.
So the scaffolding can be moved around and
Yes.
cranked up and down.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very creative.
Well, that's what became our garden. Our pots came
Oh,
from
this
that
is where
old
the old
chimney.
chimney used to be.
Yeah.
Right there.
It wasn't being used now, and we don't have a different heating system for the tenants in there later on.
Well, let's go look at the finished part of the house. Turn the camera off, sir.
From the roof?
We have another battery, so we could. This is the broken slate from the roof.
Yep, and we're going to crush it with a sledgehammer and just use it in the driveway.
And let's look at this pile of wood here. This is kindling for the McNeil power plant. And it has to be paint-free.
It has to be paint-free and glue-free, so no plywood.
How about nails? Can you have nails?
Nails are okay.
They're okay?
Yeah.
This is the lath that came off the wall in Unit 4, where we just were.
Does the power plant pay anything for?
They don't, but they don't charge. So remember, they charge a lot to get rid of construction waste, which will just get landfilled. So I think it's great. Of course, McNeil's very close to us.
Less than a
physically.
mile.
And yeah, and you just bring it there, and they don't even weigh it, but there's a special place. And they take brush also. They take anything that's wooden, that's, like I say, totally clean. It cannot, plywood's not, they won't accept plywood because of the glues. And anything that's been painted or stained, no. This looks white, but this white is from the plaster. It's not painted.
What is this big thing here with the brown tarp on it?
This is a pile of plywood that will be used to sheathe the roof, right there. And what do you see about this plywood? Is it foam? With foam insulation on it. I guess I can clear a little bit. So, if the camera can get close enough, this is a very interesting material I didn't even know existed. This
You can zoom
foam,
in on this.
There's the plywood where that blue is, and this foam is attached to it, and it has little gaps for the venting, so you don't have to install the venting, and that's a very good insulation. So upstairs is going to have this on all the roof, plus another 4 inches of blown foam. And I forget how many R's that is altogether, but it's a lot. It's again, it's like a high-performing house. And to be retrofitted into an old house is pretty neat.
So the top part is the wood, and then your shale shingles are going to go on top of the wood?
Yep, exactly. This is what we call that the sheathing, and you're right. There's maybe a felt paper, and then the shingles go right on that. So that's the end of the house right there.
We'll put it on it.
See, that's what
That's going to go back on the new roof.
Yeah. No. The new roof is not going to be slate because the reason we're not putting slate there is all the nooks and crannies. It's not a good place for slate. And the zoning board agreed, so we gotta have a permit to not use slate there. This is hard to see, but
Get the
this
camera all the
garage-
way in so the light doesn't move it in more. Okay.
this garage was so rotten that the sill that goes along the bottom was gone. It was completely, you know what? At first we thought that there never had been a sill. There weren't even the remnants at no point around the whole place. And then we realized when we started digging that there was a peat type material, like a bog. So I suppose, and it had just been, there must have been a sill, and so it had been completely rotted out, completely. And so now it was like I say, it was like a bog material. I suppose in 10,000 more years it was going to turn into peat that you could burn like they do in Ireland. So we actually jacked the whole thing up, dug it out, and put in this brand new sill, and you put down a lot of gravel first, and just save the old structure. When we started trying to save the roof, it was just so shot. It was unbelievable. It was just saturated in water because it just hadn't been cared for. And a new roof had not been put on. So we had to replace the entire thing. So at one point, what we were down to was nothing but walls. No bottom, no sill, no roof, not even rafters. So, but you know, it's nice that we saved it.
Now it's the workshop, and
the workshop.
we store the canoe and the kayak and the bicycles. And the bicycles, Curt's been riding bicycles for years and years. He used to be the bicycle coordinator for the state, and that's his primary form of transportation. And we bicycle all the time.
You have a car also, right?
Yeah, but it's parked there a lot, and I almost wish I didn't own it anymore. I can't even get rid of it right now because I don't totally own it yet. You know, I'm paying on it, but I bought it in a weak moment, and so I'm becoming an advocate of not owning a car, even though I have one. We're riding our bikes everywhere for transportation.
And Curt doesn't have a car at all.
No, he doesn't.
No, I've actually been able to do without a car for about 10 years now. And it's not easy in Vermont, but it can be done.
That's a big cost saving. A car, they say, costs about $5,000 a year to maintain. Purchase price and maintenance and everything.
Oh, it's a major savings, yeah. Yeah. So here are the pipes heading up to the solar system. The plumber did get this far. And then these go down into the ground and come out in the basement.
Pointing the camera anywhere near the door with a light is going to spoil
Yeah.
the picture.
No. Okay, let's stop.
Question about the sill, Curt. In all the course of all the work you've done, have you found any sign of termites or carpenter ants or anything like that?
Well, not termites, but we did have, and I don't know what they're called, but this plywood, the old plywood, was so saturated with water that it had thousands, tens of thousands, maybe millions of some kind of insect. It was like a fly. I'm
Well, you
not
should have saved
remembering.
it for me because I know all the bugs.
I know, I should have. And Jamie frantically said we've got to kill them before he didn't want them to actually walk over to the house. So we were just running around trying to kill as many as we could. We had a dumpster right out in the driveway at the time. But I'll have to ask him what they were called. But there were just thousands and thousands of them.
Well, was it an ant in its flight form?
I think it was an ant. I think it was a type of ant. Yeah.
They go on a nuptial flight and found an.
No,
they
yeah, I
found
think
a new,
I think they were black and they were fairly large.
Yeah.
And there were just so many. And
maybe they were carpenter ants. Maybe just this common silky sidewalk ants.
I think they might have been carpenter. Jamie was very concerned about them. He had to just kill them like crazy.
Well, I think they have a flight form too. They have the wings and then they go to a new place.
Yeah, I think
in the New York City area where I'm originally from, termites and carpenter ants were a big problem. But I've heard that this far north in Vermont, it's a little bit too cold for them. But it made me think of that when with the sill here, that would be a perfect spot for termites to, especially because it's so close to the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, except that still is pressure treated, so it's the microbes and the insects don't like it. Now this of course is original, so they still might get that, but you've got to keep things dry. I think what went wrong in this garage was that it was that the land probably built up somewhat around it as things were growing outside, and you've just like an old barn. If you look at an old Vermont barn, the bottom is high and dry. It's on top of stone. This place did not have much stone. There was just a small stone about this big in each corner. That's it. Wow. We found maybe one or two in between, but that was it. So it was, they put a sill down more or less on the ground. Now when they first did it, maybe it was on top of these stones, but they didn't pay attention to the fact that on the outside, the earth had built up from gardening and lawns, and for whatever other reason, you now had earth against the wood, and then that earth gets wet, and it stays wet, and that's what rots things. I mean, a piece of wood will last forever if it has a chance to dry. Just like old barn board. It's, I mean, really hundreds of years without any kind of coating on it at all, any kind of treatment. But if it gets wet, it's amazing how fast it'll rot. This plywood, it was so heavy. It was just so saturated, because the worst thing is when water can get in and it can't get out. You know what I mean? It doesn't evaporate out or doesn't drain out, and that's just deadly. That will kill your house so fast. But this is pressure treated, and that's why it's not going to happen to that piece.
Sink is a special feature of the kitchen here. Gail, would you like to tell us about the sink?
Well, I mentioned earlier that the sink would cut my fingers when Curt and I started dating, and I would help make a meal, and then I would do the dishes, and I would cut my fingers in the sink, and I hated the sink. It was covered in paint and chipped, and someone had tried to renovate it, but just by painting it, and it was a really tacky job. So I said, we've got to do the sink, and then we can invite some people over, and until the sink is done, we're not going to have anybody over for dinner. And we haven't, but it's now time to have people over for dinner because the sink is finished. Well, what I had to do was, first I had to sand it with fine sandpaper, and then steel wool, fine steel wool, and there was a solution that came with a kit that I got, you know, at like Home Depot, I think. And that solution washes away all of the particulates from the sanding, and then you sand again. You do that about 3 or 4 times. It takes kind of a long time to do. And then finally, you put, there's about 3 or 4 coats on here now of this epoxy primer, they call it. It's an epoxy. And it's white, and it makes it shiny. And so you wouldn't know that this had been that awful sink. It's really old. It's probably from the original house. The cabinets are built around it. Jamie built the cabinets, and we found these little knobs down at Rebuild. And then he put this in. This is coated, and it's going to stay that color. And now it's a really nice sink, and it's not disgusting. It's
the surface of the sink, it looks almost as if it were new.
Yeah, it does. And I wondered, how is it even possible? I made it my goal to go online and look and see what I could find. And then serendipitously, I found out they had this kit over at the store. And I went and got it, and Curt said, well, Curt and Jamie, after I had bleached it one day, they said, oh, it looks great. We could probably live with it like that. And I'm like, oh no. No. We really have to do more because bleaching is not enough. And he said, well, it's up to you. You figure it out. Let me know. So I figured it out, and it worked. So I'm glad. There's one little noogie here that I need to sand off. A paint drop. A drop of paint dropped on it, and it's a small imperfection. But it's shiny, that's what I like. We have to put a new faucet on here, but that works temporarily.
Oh, it looks fantastic. It's beautiful.
Thanks. I'm not going to be in this one. I don't need to paint. It's too crowded.
This foam is part of the insulation?
Yeah, that's it.
It gets hard, like rock almost.
Yeah, well, no, it still stays kind of soft. Watch your head, a lot of opportunities to bang your head.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you decide. I think here's a good spot. You can see where this was a window, so it was all rotted out. And
So the window here has been completely sealed up.
yeah, yeah, because we could have saved it. I mean, we could have not had the foam right there, but the window.
Got a bug there. See him?
Oh yeah, Gail, what's he called? Oh, we had one of these the other day.
I think that's.
Oh, that's a centipede.
Centipede.
And they bite.
They bite?
They do. The millipedes don't, but centipedes do.
I don't know if you can see with these wires here.
But they're sort of harmless.
So the foam is applied, it's sprayed on. It's only about 2 inches thick, and there's a number of things that are good about the foam for an old house. One is it seals everything up. You have a vapor barrier now. It seals, nothing seals as well as this does. It gets into every nook and cranny and seals it up. Also, if you have old windows like we had here that needed to be replaced, I said, you know what? They don't provide that much light anyway. Cruise right over it. So the window is in there, encased in the foam. But look how well sealed that is in terms of air leakage. And then it has a lot of R's, a lot of insulation. It's really going to be a warm cellar. You can't tell today because of the fact that above there it's not living space yet. It's under construction and wide open. And then another thing that never occurred to me before is when you have an old house with old foundations, they're stones. And you always have some trouble with them. They move around, the house settles, and of course they're extremely important. It's your foundation. This bonds the whole thing up, even though it's a plastic. Just look at it as one unit now. It's bonded those stones up better than mortar ever could. And it's not going to change like mortar. It's not going to slowly turn to dust and start falling on the floor like old mortar does. So yeah, vapor barrier, structurally helpful for your foundation, and no better insulator and no better sealer. And he went from the floorboards all the way to the floor. And it was surprisingly inexpensive, actually. And this was another thing that Vermont Gas helped pay for.
From here down to the floor, it's about 5 feet, and on the other side of here, there's solid dirt, right? So you're underground here. And what happens as if water seeps down in through the dirt into the wall? Will this keep the floor dry?
It will, yeah. I mean, the water may eventually get down to get underneath and come up. But in terms of keeping the foundation dry, there's nothing better that I can think of.
It's very dry down here.
Yeah. Well, we're very lucky. This section of the Old North End is very dry. My neighbors who've had houses here for years say they maybe once or twice in 20 years have they had water in the basement. That's great. And this is quite dry.
Even with Hurricane Irene, you didn't have any?
Yep, that's right. No, we didn't.
We're up high here.
This is kind of an interesting setup over here. This is your furnace, I guess, right?
Yep. It's not a great furnace. It's not that new. The new ones are better. It was something I just couldn't afford at this time. I'd love to get a new furnace, but you
And
see
the
the
water and everything.
plumber did a beautiful job.
This is gas?
Yep. This is gas. This burner is actually one that I lease from our gas for just $12 a month, and then they maintain it, and they do. We've had a couple of problems, and they came and fixed it, no charge. This is the solar tank here. This is an 80-gallon stainless steel tank, which is really nice, very well insulated, and it has 2 heat exchangers in it. One for the furnace. In other words, the furnace can make this hot, and so can the solar system. That's what the second heat exchanger is for. And so all the hot water will come out of here, whether it's heated by the solar system or by the furnace.
So in the summertime, it's heated by the solar system, and in the winter, it would be more by the furnace.
They estimate about 50-50 in the winter, because you get solar help in the winter also, but not enough for the whole winter. And there's 2 reasons for that. The sun is so low in the winter. There's some heat loss, of course, in the pipes coming into the cellar in the winter. And people require a warmer shower in the winter. So I think those are the reasons. But I've had a solar system before, and we found that we got our hot water, 100% of the hot water, spring, summer, and fall. Only in winter did we not.
You have another little tank here. What is that for?
That's called the expansion tank. A plumber could explain exactly what it does. I actually don't know exactly what they do, but if you didn't have them, I guess when the system, the pressure in the system expands for some reason, you would break parts of the system. That maybe the more sensitive places would just break, whereas here, pressure expands. This has a diaphragm in it, and that diaphragm literally stretches with this, so it's a place for pressure to go. I think that's the purpose of it. If there's any plumber watching, I hope I've got that half right at least.
Sounds reasonable to me.
There's our, speaking of energy efficiency, here's our front-loading Energy Star washer. Works great.
You don't have a dryer.
It's going to be, a lot of this stuff won't be here. I'm storing things for friends. But this will all be out. Most of it will be out, hopefully. It's not a great cellar. I mean, it's kind of low, as you can see. And a lot of, right behind your head is I've hit my head on that right there. See?
Oh, yes.
That one hurts.
Yeah. So,
I've hit that a number of times.
But you're going to have your laundry, this is going to be the laundry room down here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like drying upstairs where it's heated because the clothes get dry so fast. I mean, we have radiators, and you put the socks on there, and in just a few hours they're dry. They're almost as fast as a clothes dryer. And also, when you dry indoors in the winter, it's good for the air because you need moisture in your air in the winter. So that added moisture to the house it's better to have it. I've always thought it's a shame with clothes dryers that they vent outdoors, and you vent that heat. You send that heat outdoors in the winter. And then with the gas dryer, you can't use one of those devices that try to keep some of the heat. You can't do that with a gas. It's not considered safe. So yeah, no clothes dryer at all. So I just wanted you to see the foam down here. It was the main reason to come down here.
So this is the electrical molding.
Well, it's called wire molding.
We're going to talk about it, so stand back and... I noticed part of the, Curt, old wiring here. This is what we were talking about upstairs, isn't it? The
yes.
Exterior electric. The wire runs through here like a conduit, and then it comes into here to the switch. And this you're putting all into the walls eventually, right?
Right. It's called wire molding. And the point upstairs is that we won't need that there because we've gutted it. So the wiring will go on the walls like it usually does. This system is used for what we might call old work, where it's difficult to get into the walls and to go across the walls without making a lot of holes in the wall. So we put the whole system on the surface. But as you can see, it's nowhere near as good looking. And there's quite a bit here they were trying to accomplish. There's an outlet down there and a switch and that smoke detector and a light. So, you know, it's quite an apparatus to have up there. When you live in it, you get used to it. But
when the house was originally built, it was probably before the time of electricity, right? Back in the 1800s.
Long before. The section we're standing in now was built in 1830.
So that's why all of this had to be added afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Another advantage of the gutting.
Yeah. And in here we have your bedroom, right?
Yeah. Behind Terry.
Let me close the bathroom door.
Here, I'll let.
Okay, this apartment is only partially finished, and in here we have the bedroom, and we don't have enough clotheslines, so we're drying the shirts on the exposed piping. There's an advantage here. It acts as a substitute clothesline, and
right above the radiator. It's very good in the winter too.
Yes, that helps to dry the clothes. And we can see the hardwood floors here. You're going to sand these all down, but that is really special to have hardwood floors.
It is, and every unit has them, I was very happy to see that. The one upstairs came out just beautiful. It's always a surprise when people cover the floor like this one had been in a paint, and then you rent one of those sanders and you sand it, and then you polyurethane it, and people are just always, I'm always surprised how beautiful they are. Just the natural wood of any kind of hardwood is and even a softwood is beautiful. Hardwood is better in that it's going to last longer for all the traffic. And I don't even know how old these are, but they're quite old. As you can see, they're wide. They are not a tube. They are tongue and groove. So they're not super old, but again, we need a historian that could estimate the age, but I'm sure they're quite old. No, they're not the more narrow type. They're pretty wide.
And the windows, these are the original windows from the house, aren't they?
Yes.
You're not going to replace these?
It helps you pull it up, just like a tape measure recoils. It works very well. We couldn't believe how nicely they work when we put them back together.
Old windows used to have weights in here. Did you?
Yeah. These, we don't seem to have that, or even the remnants of that in this house. Maybe because of the bricks, I don't know. These were tougher than that. You just have these little rocker cams here that you open the window up and then you close that. This one actually doesn't even work very well because we haven't done this one. We haven't done this whole unit. And that's not the best way. So we actually have to use the old sticks, which is dangerous and actually not legal in an apartment either. You have to have something like this. But the recoils work beautifully, and there's two of them. So even if one breaks, the other one will keep it from smashing down. And you can open and close those windows with one finger. It's like a modern window, and yet we did it with the old window. And they seal beautifully. When you close them, you get that zoop sound. You know what I mean? So we're very happy with that. And then we make sure the storm windows are in good shape on the outside to get double glazing.
These windows probably originally had lead-based paint all over them. How did you handle that?
Yeah, we have to bring them into the garage, and then we put plastic down, and then you put a face mask on, and you spray water. You do it. My son's lead certified for doing all this. You have to have not just a face mask to protect yourself, but you have to try to minimize the dust that leaves by spraying with spray can of water, and no power. Do it all by hand. Again, it's to minimize
So
the
you
airborne dust.
you sand it
Yeah,
down
you sand it by hand.
by hand.
Yep, you scrape it. You mainly scrape it, and then if there's any rotten spots, which there aren't in this unit, but some of the units they've gotten pretty wet, and then he epoxies those, reglazes if necessary, and then this weather stripping does not glue on or screw on. It goes on in a much more substantial way. You literally have to route out a trench, sort of, a small trench in the wood, and then you slide it, the weather stripping into it. So it's quite permanent. As you can see, I was just very happy with those. And it's costing us a bit of money to save the windows, but definitely less than new windows would have been. And the zoning board, as I said, was very happy about it because they want to see old windows like this kept, if possible. And they don't like to see vinyl replacements.
Curt, you were telling us that you love this neighborhood.
Yes, I fell in love with this house mainly because of where it is. As soon as I saw it and saw that it was on the market, because it's a 10-minute walk to downtown. It's so ethnically diverse. I mean, this district, the old North End, is clearly the most ethnically diverse district or neighborhood in this whole state by far. And we're right in the heart of it here, just 1 block north of North Street, and we have the Asian market across the street, which when you go in there, you might as well be in Vietnam. You'll be the only one speaking English, and it's just wonderful. And the products they have, it's great, and very good prices. And we have East Africans walking up and down the street, because a lot of East Africans live in Riverside Drive and Riverside Avenue, and it's just wonderful. Campaigning here was, it was just, there were more folks from Nepal, for instance, and Bhutan than I had realized. An awful lot. And I would tell people, you know, you can have me over for dinner anytime. I'll bring the wine if you do the cooking. The smells, and the women are cooking from the morning all day, and I got to where I could tell as I approached the door where the people were from by the scent coming from the kitchen, and it was just great. Of course, most of those people couldn't vote because they weren't citizens, but many of them are on track to become citizens, and looking forward to that. And many were citizens. I've registered some to vote, so it's just a wonderful neighborhood.
You have the community health center right down here at the end of the
just
street.
2 doors down. Yeah.
Do you go there for your dental and medical work?
The community health. Yeah. I don't. I might be eligible. I don't know, but I forget. I've gone there a few times actually, looking especially for dental, but I actually don't. I really forget why.
I think anybody can go there, even if they're rich. You just pay a little bit more if you have more money.
Yeah, there was a problem. I don't know if they weren't taking anybody. I was going to have to wait too long because I think I was going because I needed to see a dentist that week. Mm-hmm. So I went to my old dentist.
And how do you feel about having the food shelf right across the street here?
Oh, it's great. It's very active and brings people around. There's homeless people who are living between different places, the shelters and the Intervale, and then there's also all the people that volunteer there. We've certainly had no problems as a result of the food shelf.
Have you noticed that some of the homeless people who live in their cars park here on Decatur Street because when they wake up in the morning they can go across the street for breakfast?
There is one fellow that's been doing that lately. Yeah, we also had another fellow that was on the street a lot. I don't know where he was at night, but who died recently, which was very sad. And he certainly didn't take good care of himself. I won't mention his name, but he was a friend. And so yes, I mean this neighborhood has everything. And although I will say this, campaigning here. I don't recall standing on any porch or knocking on any door where the occupant appeared to be terribly wealthy. I mean, it's the whole district, and it's a 2-member district, it's very large. And obviously there must be some professionals and people with pretty good incomes, but you don't sense
any real wealth anywhere. And also downtown is in the district, which I love, and the train station's in the district, which I love. And then, at least for the time being, the Democratic headquarters happen to be in the district, so it had everything I needed.
For Democratic and progressive politicians like me, it's an ideal location because it's the people that we really want to help.
It really is. I don't know if we would be the poorest district in the state. We're probably not, but we certainly are not the wealthiest by any means.
You made an important point about wanting to have a four-family house as opposed to a bigger house. Can you talk a little bit about what that means in as far as regulation here in Burlington?
Yes, a four family, if you're interested in having property that you develop and then rent and maybe living in, which is what we do here. I live in one of the 4 units. The number 4 is a good place to look at, because 5 or more, it's a whole new world of banking and of regulation. A lot of regulation is from 1 to 4 units, and then from 5 or more, it's just clearly commercial. And it brings about some more regulation when you need permits for certain things. And then the banks, and I know the banks are not all the same on this, but I believe most banks, and in general, for instance, a mortgage and a line of credit and home equity loans, you can, for most banks, you're treated like it was a single family house. In other words, it's a home. If it's owner occupied, again, which mine is, you get you're treated like a homeowner, and therefore you pay lower interest rates. It's a much better deal. 5 or more, and it's commercial. Again, I know I don't speak for all the banks. I'm not a banker, and I know they're not all the same. As a matter of fact, I know of one bank that would not give me a loan because they went up to only 3 units. But I think most banks cut it off at 4. So it's a nice size. It's also very manageable. You know, I mean, even if you don't live in the building, 4 is a lot easier to manage than 5 or more. And living here is just perfect because, you know, my tenants are become my friends, and they're my neighbors, not just my tenants, and vice versa. So I think everybody benefits from that. I think, you know, better care is taken of your building by your tenants, and I think you treat your tenants better, being really almost with them.
I had a similar situation in the suburbs of New York City. I acquired a 4-family house, and I changed it into a 3-family house. But many of the regulations and rules would have changed if I had gone to more than 4 families. And but that's an important issue I think we should bring out, being here in Burlington, because I'm a commissioner on the Burlington Housing Board of Review, and we've had issues coming up of whether or not we should have the right to, when landlords come before us in their disputes with tenants, whether we should have the right to bring out the fact that a landlord is a small landlord and maybe living in the house, as opposed to there's many big landlords here in Burlington that have hundreds of units, and they want to be treated the same way as a small landlord living in the home and with only 3 or 4 units. And my position is, and I was appointed to the board during the progressive administration of Bob Kiss, and now since the administration has changed, there's a pressure to change the board too. But my position is that I should have a right to bring out in the hearings whether how many units the landlord has, and the small landlord should be treated differently than the large landlord. The rules should be applied very strictly to the large landlord, whereas the small landlord we can make exceptions because he may be new, he may not be familiar with all the law, and we can try to be helpful. So I want to bring that out for our viewing public, and it's important when you vote to take into consideration that the liberal Democrats and the progressives care about working people and people in the old North End, and the Republicans and some of the blue dog Democrats only care about the rich. So that's my position.
Well, on that note, maybe we should warm up with a little tea because it is a cold day, even though it's Mother's Day. And
that looks good.
It's warm in here, but we haven't been in here that long. So how about some tea?
Thank you.
Here's a
You can turn it off. I think.